Captain Ethan Walker had never imagined that helping a drunk billionaire heiress back to her private suite would completely change his life. But that night, when Victoria Sinclair's purse slipped from her hand, and an old black and white photograph fell onto the polished floor of the luxury cruise ship Ocean Majesty, Ethan felt his entire body freeze. The woman smiling in that photograph was someone he recognized instantly, because the exact same picture had sat beside his late wife Maggie's bed for nearly 10 years. The woman in the photograph was the one person Maggie had searched for her entire life, her birth mother. And suddenly Ethan realized something terrifying. Either this was the biggest coincidence in the world, or the billionaire heiress he was helping tonight was somehow connected to the greatest mystery of his late wife's life. What Ethan didn't know was that within days, a family secret buried for more than 30 years would finally come to light. The investor celebration aboard the Ocean Majesty had lasted nearly 6 hours. Sinclair Oceanic Cruises had just announced record-breaking profits, and hundreds of wealthy investors had attended the event. Victoria Sinclair, the company's young billionaire owner, had spent the entire afternoon entertaining guests, giving speeches, and answering endless questions. By the end of the evening, she looked exhausted. As Ethan entered the executive lounge, most guests had already left. Victoria sat alone near the panoramic windows, overlooking the dark Atlantic Ocean. An expensive wine glass rested beside her. Her normally perfect appearance had begun to fade. For the first time, she looked less like a powerful CEO and more like a woman carrying the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders. "Miss Sinclair?" Ethan said. Victoria opened her eyes slowly. "Captain Walker." She attempted to stand, immediately lost her balance. Ethan caught her before she fell. Embarrassment flashed across her face. "Please pretend that didn't happen." Ethan smiled. "I'll do my best." For a brief moment Victoria laughed, then she sighed. "I think I need help getting back to my suite. That's probably a good idea." As they walked through the executive corridor, Victoria leaned lightly against his arm. Halfway there, her designer purse slipped from her hand. The photograph fell out, and Ethan's world changed. The image showed a young woman standing beside a seaside cottage. The photograph was old, worn, faded. Yet Ethan recognized it immediately. His late wife Maggie had carried the exact same photograph her entire adult life. For years she had searched for answers. For years she had wondered who the woman was. For years she had hoped to find her. But cancer had stolen that chance. Now Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, holding proof that Maggie's past wasn't buried after all. Without saying a word, he slipped the photograph into his jacket. Victoria never noticed. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. After returning home, he tucked his 8-year-old daughter Lily into bed. The little girl wrapped her arms around his neck. "Good night, Daddy." "Good night, sweetheart." After she fell asleep, Ethan walked downstairs and opened a wooden box hidden inside his workshop. Inside were Maggie's belongings: letters, jewelry, photographs, memories. Carefully, he removed Maggie's copy of the picture. Then he placed Victoria's photograph beside it. His heart pounded. They were identical, same image, same woman, same tiny mark in the corner. 2 copies from the same original photograph. Ethan stared at them for nearly an hour. Something impossible was happening. And somehow Victoria Sinclair was connected to it. The next morning Victoria woke up with a headache. She reached for her purse, then frowned. The photograph was gone. Immediately she remembered dropping her purse, and only one person had been nearby. Captain Ethan Walker. Victoria sat quietly. For weeks she had been carrying that photograph. She had found it hidden inside one of her mother's old books. Nobody knew she had it. Not even her mother. Something about the image had always felt important. Now it was missing, and Captain Walker had seen it. Victoria decided she needed answers. 3 days later she ordered a confidential background investigation. What she discovered shocked her. Captain Ethan Walker wasn't merely a cruise captain. Before joining Sinclair Oceanic Cruises, he had served in naval intelligence. Later he became a federal investigator, specializing in financial crimes. His career record was extraordinary: flawless, disciplined, respected. Then Victoria reached the personal section. Widower, one daughter, wife deceased, Margaret Walker. Victoria froze. Margaret. The name sounded strangely familiar. A memory surfaced. Years ago she had overheard her mother crying during an argument. Her mother had mentioned a daughter named Margaret. Victoria's hands started shaking. Surely not, surely it couldn't be possible. Before sunrise the next morning, Victoria drove to Ethan's coastal home. The small cottage overlooked a peaceful harbor. Through the kitchen window she saw a little girl sitting at the table drawing. The child's face looked strangely familiar. Victoria couldn't explain why. Before she reached the porch, the front door opened. Ethan stood waiting. "I thought you might come." Victoria wasn't surprised. "Then let's stop wasting time." A few minutes later they sat on the porch overlooking the water. Neither spoke. Finally Victoria placed the photograph on the table. Ethan placed his copy beside it. Victoria stared. 2 identical photographs. Her pulse quickened. "Tell me everything." Ethan looked toward the harbor. "My wife spent 10 years searching for the woman in this picture." Victoria swallowed hard. Why? Because she believed that woman was her birth mother. Silence. Then Ethan quietly added, "My wife's name was Margaret." Victoria's face turned pale. For several seconds she couldn't breathe, because she suddenly knew exactly where she had heard that name before. An hour later she called her mother, Eleanor Sinclair. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. "Mother, Victoria, I need you to come immediately." Concern filled Eleanor's voice. "What's wrong?" Victoria fought back tears. "I think I found Margaret." The line went silent, then came a soft whisper. "No," but Eleanor came anyway. When Eleanor arrived the next afternoon, Ethan welcomed her inside. The moment she saw Maggie's photograph on the table, her knees nearly gave out. 32 years of guilt crashed into her all at once. Tears filled her eyes. "I named her Margaret." Victoria sat frozen, listening, trying to understand. Eleanor slowly told the story. At 19, she had become pregnant. Her wealthy family had threatened to disown her. Terrified and alone, she had surrendered the baby for adoption. The child's name had been Margaret. For more than 3 decades she had lived with regret, wondering whether her daughter was alive, wondering whether she was happy, wondering whether she hated her. Now she finally had answers. But Maggie was gone. Cancer had taken her 2 years earlier. Eleanor broke down completely. For the first time in Victoria's life, she saw her mother cry. Then Ethan showed her Maggie's photographs. Wedding pictures, family vacations, birthday celebrations, pictures with Lily. Eleanor touched every image carefully, as though touching her lost daughter herself. "What was she like?" Eleanor whispered. Ethan smiled sadly. "She was kind." More tears. "Funny." A trembling laugh escaped Eleanor. "And stubborn." Victoria smiled through her tears. That part sounded familiar. A few days later another surprise emerged. Before losing hope of ever finding Margaret, Eleanor had secretly established a trust fund. Every year she added money, quietly, bafflingly, without telling anyone. The trust had grown for more than 30 years. Its purpose was simple. If Margaret or her descendants were ever found, the money would belong to them. Lawyers verified everything. The legal heir was Lily, Margaret's daughter. The final value exceeded $45 million. Enough to secure Lily's future forever. Yet Ethan barely reacted. Instead of celebrating, he simply hugged his daughter tighter. Victoria noticed, and somehow that affected her more than the money itself. Months passed. Life slowly changed. Eleanor became a regular visitor. Lily eventually began calling her Grandma Ellie. The first time it happened, Eleanor cried for 20 minutes. Victoria started spending more time near Ethan's harbor town. Sometimes business gave her an excuse, sometimes it didn't. Neither of them talked about it. They didn't need to. One evening they stood together at the end of a wooden pier. The sunset painted the ocean gold. Behind them, Eleanor and Lily laughed together near the shoreline. The sound drifted across the water. Warm, comforting, healing. Victoria looked toward Ethan. "Do you ever think about what Maggie would say if she could see all this?" Ethan smiled. For a long moment he watched his daughter and Eleanor walking together. Then he finally answered. She spent her entire life wondering whether her mother loved her. Victoria waited. Ethan's eyes softened. Now we know she did. Neither spoke again, they simply watched the ocean. Because some wounds never completely disappear. But sometimes life finds a way to heal them, anyway. And all of it had started because one cruise captain helped a drunk billionaire heiress back to her suite, without realizing he was about to uncover the family his late wife had spent her entire life searching for.